This is Kentucky's Voice Radio, covering the latest state and local issues with Tom Fallbush, Bob Scott, and Jim Waters.
Good morning, friends. Welcome to Kentucky's Voice, live on 970 WGTK Radio and simulcast to WBNA TV, Channel 21. I'm your host today, Bob Scott. And yes, it's Monday, July the 21st. I hope you had a great weekend. You can join in the show by texting us at 502-571-0970. Again, that text line number is 502-571-0970. Or if you believe in the mission of Kentucky's Voice and want to financially support us, you can do so by texting us at 53555-KY-VOICE. Again, that support number is 53555-KY-VOICE. Well, let me tell you, we've got a jam-packed show today, two phenomenal guests, and a lot of important ground to cover. In the first half of the program, I'll be joined by Kentucky State Representative John Hodson. He's a frequent guest to our program and a dear friend. We'll talk about what's happening right now at both the state and national levels, including some highlights from the recent ALEC conference that John attended in Indianapolis. We'll also take a look back at the first 6 months of President Trump's initial term. I think most of us would say it's been more than a little successful. And just, see where the real momentum right now in the country is going. We've also got a clip to remind us of that success concerning President Trump coming up in a moment. In the second half of the show, my friend Colonel Glenn Kelly, a retired Army colonel and Green Beret, will join me to discuss some serious security concerns going on right now in our country. We'll talk about potential threats to the homeland and how we need to get serious about protecting our national data infrastructure. So, let's get started. Invite a friend to tune in. This is a show that they will not want to miss. Let's remind ourselves what leadership with America First priorities looked like. We're going to roll a quick compilation of the first 6 months of President Trump's success just to set the tone for this conversation. Please play clip 2.
President Trump marking 6 months in the White House.
It is my honor to introduce to you the 45th and the 47th President of the United States of America, Donald J. Trump.
Donald Trump immediately getting to work with a remarkable show of the use of executive power.
We've never seen anything like this. There's 20,000 people cheering for every executive order signed.
President Trump comes in and immediately begins taking action to fix each and every one of these fires that the Democrats started.
It's 6 months delivering on the agenda. This ultimately is promises made, promises kept by the president.
This is a message to the rest of the world. The days of ripping off America and Americans are officially over.
The Trump archives are a series of near impossible feats.
We have the safest, most secure border in the history of this nation.
Border crossings have dropped so much that federal agents now outnumber illegal crossers.
He had a mandate and he's delivering on it. The American economy is better for it.
NASDAQ and S&P both hitting all-time highs.
Gas prices are down. Retail sales are up. $2 trillion in international financial agreement and record tariff revenue.
The USA is on a roll.
Culminating in the signing of the One Big Beautiful Bill on July 4th.
A bill for and by the people.
Thanks to this bill, Trump could resign tomorrow and still point to an enduring legacy.
And he's full steam ahead for America.
This movement that President Trump has started is only getting bigger. It has more energy, more enthusiasm.
What he's going to do is show up and work hard and deliver every day for the American people.
You're watching history, so buckle up, because the next 3.5 years will probably be just as busy.
It's easy to forget just how much has been accomplished in these early months of the Trump administration. I mean, it's hard to believe it's only been 6 months, that he's been in there. But, we've seen tax cuts, border security absolutely improved. These are things that he ran on. Energy independence, hitting in very strongly in that direction. And, of course, standing up to China and those who are against the United States of America. All of it mattered, and all of it is at risk right now. Joining me now to talk about where we go from here is State Representative John Hodgson. Representative, good morning, sir.
Good morning, Bob. Glad to be with you.
And I want to remind those who are tuning in, you can join in the show by texting us at 502-571-0970, or if you believe in the mission of Kentucky's Voice and want to financially support us, you can do so by texting us at 53555, KY Voice. And again, John, we are honored to have you on, brother. You always bring great insight. Looking back at that clip, how do you think Kentucky benefited directly from those first 6 months under President Trump?
Well, I think the nation is benefiting in every way. The biggest thing by far is the closure of our border. We're no longer being invaded on a large scale by foreign actors, and you can see a little bit of lessening in the traffic. You can see the employment numbers where native-born citizens picked up 2 million jobs, whereas foreign-born workers dropped by about 500,000 jobs in the last few months. So it's just decreasing the strain on our services and our traffic, and people are getting back to work. Interest rates are down, price of eggs is down, price of gas is down. Things are looking up all over. And I think what matters most to Americans is what's called kitchen table issues. We're concerned about the ability to put food on the table and send your kids to school and be safe in your neighborhood. And I think President Trump's agenda in the first 6 months is addressing all of those things and yielding tangible results right away.
Yeah, and I say amen to that. I know there's been a few bumps in the road that are be expected, but I agree. I think we are for sure. As a nation, as a state, hitting in the direction we need to be going. We certainly know the path. The previous path under the former administration was not a good path to be on. So, you just got back from the ALEC conference in Indianapolis. What were some of the key takeaways for Kentucky conservatives coming out of that event? You might just want to explain to the folks what the ALEC conference was.
Yes, that's the American Legislative Exchange Conference, and that's an annual convention. It's about 1,500 legislators from across the country. It's nonpartisan, but it does tend to be very conservative. For instance, we start every day at 7 o'clock with a devotion and have a Bible teacher and talk about principled leadership and things like that. Sets a good tone for the conference. And we had speakers like Indiana Governor Mike Braun telling us how he's getting things done there, and Vivek Ramaswamy came in and spoke to us.
Oh wow!
And so nice to have some of these national thought leaders who are actually implementing things in their home states. And here's the lessons they learn, and here's the things we can do. So what we do at that conference is we hear about innovative policies that other states have, and we debate how we might come up with a model policy to spread to multiple states. And I always come back, and my colleagues, there's about 30 of my colleagues there, and we come back with a lot of ideas to populate the 2026 legislative session. Hey, did you see what Tennessee just did? Did you see what Ohio did? Let's copy that and make a Kentucky version of that. So my notebook is full of ideas for those things, and we'll be working on those for the next couple of months, and maybe getting some of those heard in summer committees so we can introduce them next year. But,
you bring up a good point, and that's really probably the major benefit of these national conferences is to share ideas and, as you said, garner information that's going to have an impact, hopefully positive impact. Back in your of course, we're talking about Kentucky here, but the several states. Another theme of the ALEC conference is looking at restoring state power. In the face of federal overreach, again, especially under the previous administration. Where do you see Kentucky making strides in that area?
Well, I think we're going to assert our state sovereignty in several areas. One of them is we passed a law last session about not allowing hostile countries to the United States, including China, to buy farmland, especially close to military bases.
And I can't tell you how thrilled I was to see that legislation come through. Personally, would like to see it go a step further, but you guys, and I know you spearheaded that, and it was good to see. And we're going to be talking about that later in the program today.
Yeah, a bunch of people worked on that. I can't take credit for it, but it's something all of us wanted to get done. Something else, I think we may talk about this some more, but looking at atmospheric regulation on solar radiation modification and geoengineering. That's a global thing, but we don't want it done over the skies of Kentucky. And we're going to assert our 10th Amendment sovereignty and say, if you want to experiment, do what you will, but you're not going to do it over Kentucky. And because the Constitution under the 10th Amendment gives states broad powers and said anything not specifically enumerated to the Congress as far as federal powers are reserved for the states and the people respectively. And ever since particularly Roosevelt, that 10th Amendment has been trampled on. Bit by bit, we're going to try to reassert that sovereignty. I don't even know that people realize that it was the states that established the federal government, not the other way around. The states came first, and then they formed a federal government in 1776, and made that more formal with the Constitution in 1787.
A point that's easily forgotten.
Right.
The media would like it to think it was the other way around, but you're right. It really wasn't. We have a little over a minute to go in this segment, Representative. What message do you want our listeners to hear today about staying engaged as we head into 2025?
I think it's just essential for people to stay engaged, stay informed, which is tricky these days. But find some people that you can follow from a reputable source. I don't listen to a lot of mainstream news. I get a lot of my news direct from newsmakers on X. Get involved when you're concerned about an issue. Contact your state rep, your senator, your city council person, whatever's the appropriate level of government. Let them know what you think. I've got 45,000 constituents. I probably hear from 100 of them on a regular basis. And, those are the people that tend to get in your ear and alert you to things, and it's very helpful.
Yeah, they're not bashful about sharing their thoughts, that's for sure. And
they're not.
For those of you just joining, I have my special guest today, Representative John Hodgson, on the programming. We will be in the next segment talking about geoengineering, something John had mentioned, and weather modification. Please stay tuned. We'll be right back with more of Kentucky's Voice.
Back to Kentucky's Voice Radio, online at kyvoice.org.
And welcome back to Kentucky's Voice with my special guest on this first part of the show, State Representative John Hodgson. I want to mention that and really would like to pivot to an issue that's getting more attention lately. Geoengineering and weather modification is something we did discuss very briefly in the first segment, but I'd like to take a deeper dive into that. And before we get to John, I'd like for everybody to listen to a clip from former Congressman Lee Zeldin, where he talks about geoengineering concerns. Please play clip 4.
Concerned Americans have urgent and important questions about geoengineering and contrails. The American public deserves and expects honesty and transparency from their government when seeking answers. But for years, people who asked questions in good faith were dismissed, even vilified by the media and their own government. That era is over. The Trump EPA is committed to total transparency. As a result, I tasked my team at EPA to compile a list of everything we know about contrails and geoengineering for the purpose of releasing it to you now publicly. In other words, I want you to know everything I know about these topics and without any exception. Instead of simply dismissing these questions and concerns as baseless conspiracies, we're meeting them head on. We did the legwork, looked at the science, consulted agency experts, and pulled in relevant outside information to put these online resources together. Everything we know about contrails to solar geoengineering will be in there. That means anyone who reads...
And of course, Lee Zeldin is now the director of the EPA. So what he's saying is carrying significant weight with regard to that. And I do have another really quick clip that I'd like to share with everybody as well. That's not conspiracy. That's real conversation happening in government circles right now. How refreshing. And just last week, Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene filed what's being called the Clear Skies Act, which would ban weather modification and geoengineering programs in the United States. Let's hear her statement.
I have a big announcement to make. My Clear Skies Act has been filed. This is my legislation to ban weather modification and geoengineering of all kinds. Finally, we can really take the fight in Washington to protect our skies, protect our water, protect our atmospheres, and most of all, protect our families. Thanks for your support, everyone. Look for my legislation, the Clear Skies Act.
Well, and I will say, in my humble opinion, there's very few people in the state of Kentucky, certainly in the legislature, that's able to speak to this topic as much as Representative John Hodgson is. And that's part of the reason why I wanted you on the show today, John, because we're now seeing significant policy conversations on a national level taking place. The first time that I can remember that happening with regard to geoengineering and weather modification. And why do you think this is all of a sudden in the headlines?
Well, I think it's 100% the Trump administration. He has reversed course of the federal government and come out of the closet with this, if you will, and told us everything. I would encourage everybody to go look at EPA.gov and read every line of their section on geoengineering. There's a lot of questions and answers and resources in there. I've been through the whole thing, and it matches what the research that I've done for the last several years. I think they're making full disclosure on where we've been with this. We've been doing cloud seeding in this country since 1946. We tried to use weather modification as a weapon of war in Vietnam. We signed a treaty in about 1980 promising not to use it as a weapon of war anymore. And the Biden White House commissioned a paper on how we might do something called solar radiation modification, or SRM, through stratospheric aerosol injection, or SAI. And their bright idea was that we would go spray reflective materials at 50,000 feet to block sunlight and cool off the earth. What could possibly go wrong? Not to mention the fact
on
that
so many different levels, I might add.
Yeah, not to mention the fact that the earth might get too cool and we might have crop failures. But whatever the stuff is they spray up there, aluminum flakes or other types of chemicals, are eventually going to precipitate down on the farmland where we grow the food that we eat. So I've got a bill that I filed last year along with Senator Steve Rawlings, and it's pretty simple. It says that don't do weather modification over the skies of Kentucky. We're going to assert our 10th Amendment sovereignty and say experiment somewhere else if you will, but you're not going to do over in Kentucky. We're going to make that a felony. We're going to make it fine of $500,000, and that would be for again, stratospheric aerosol injection, anything attempting to modify the weather, cloud seeding, which they don't do here. They do it out west in about 8 states, but they don't do it here in Kentucky. But anything that's intentionally dispersing pollutants into the upper atmosphere for the intent of modifying the weather or cooling the earth through blocking sunlight. Now, popular thing that is not covered here is the ordinary contrail that you see, the white lines coming out of the back of a jet aircraft. That's an atmospheric phenomenon that happens at 35,000 feet. The only way to make those things go away is if you ban jet aviation at 35,000 feet. They did consider, believe it or not, dropping all commercial aviation down to about 25,000, where it would not make contrails, but that burns so much extra fuel, you're actually putting more pollutants in the atmosphere. I think we've all found those, seen the white lines up there become these long, thin clouds, become thicker, and by the afternoon you've got a haze. And I mean, that is pollution to the extent that the car exhaust is pollution. You start your car on a cold morning, there's fog coming out the back end. It's the same kind of phenomenon. And that does have an atmospheric effect. But banning jet aviation is a pretty big step to get rid of that. But what we want to stop is the really sinister stuff, which I think trying to play God, block sunlight from striking the earth, and not having to deal, at least in Kentucky, with the implications of that. Tennessee has done that. Some other states are toying with that. I think Florida has done that. Now Marjorie Taylor Greene has a national bill that will do that. And honestly, doing this in Kentucky is more of a symbolic act because the atmosphere moves around and covers us all. So something they spray at Indiana would come here. But I think we've got to stop this and just say this is crazy. We're not going to play God. We're not going to have the hubris to think that we can control the weather with unknown effects in the future.
And that's why it really does need to be something on the federal level, because what you just said is true, to really stop it, or at least bring it under a much greater control, would be to make it a federal law as opposed to a state, because you're right, things will move around. And it's interesting because some folks will, dismiss this as fringe, at least they did, or conspiratorial. However, my argument would be is when members of Congress start introducing legislation, it's real, and whether on the state level or federal level.
Well, it's not fringe when the U.S. EPA says, "Yep, this is what's been going on."
That's right.
The government did it, so
yeah,
so it's out there. And I think we are going to do something at the state level, because I think enforcement might require state level action, but certainly banning at the federal level is something we want to do as well. But that's a lot of what we try to do at these legislative conferences. As we talk about, making America great again, making America healthy again, what can we do as state legislators to support that agenda?
Yes.
And, send a message to the president, send a message to Congress. Yes, we're with you. We want to do this. We're only one state, but we're jumping in on this.
Well, John, we have just about a minute and a half to go in this segment, and you will be sadly leaving us, and I'll be bringing on my friend Colonel Glenn Kelly for segment 3. But do you have any final thoughts to leave with our viewers and listeners today?
I do want to just mention to everybody that the Fancy Farm Picnic is coming up, and there will be presentations there by each of the 3 candidates looking to replace Mitch McConnell as our U.S. Senator. It's a pretty important deal. First time that seat has been open in 40 years. So I think Nate Morris has been making some very interesting statements about, very hardline stance on shutting down immigration, and I'm looking forward to hear what those candidates have to say at Fancy Farm on August 2nd. So tune in for that.
Yeah, and there's a lot of excitement for that reason. What you just shared is Fancy Farm this year is going to be very significant. We've had as you mentioned, Mitch McConnell in there for the last 40 plus years. Representing our state, so it's going to be a real opportunity to hear what the candidates are going to be sharing, and I'm excited about it myself. Anyway, John, it's been an honor to have you on, brother. We appreciate you, and we'll have you back on here again in the near future. You're listening to Kentucky's Voice. Stay tuned. We'll be back with my friend Colonel Glenn Kelly.
Kentucky's Voice Radio online at kyvoice.org.
And welcome back for segment 3 of Kentucky's Voice. Thank you for those of you who have tuned in today. You can join the show by texting us at 502-571-0970. Again, that text line number, if you have a comment or thought that you'd like to share, is 502-571-0970. Or if you just believe in the mission of Kentucky's Voice and what we're doing to bring conservative truth to the bluegrass area and want to financially support us, you can do so by texting us at 53555 KY Voice. Again, that's 53555 KY Voice. Well, in our second half today, I'm honored to bring in Colonel Glenn Kelly. He's a retired Army colonel and Green Beret. Glenn has decades of experience protecting this nation. He's absolutely incredible as far as what he's done in the past. I might add in, he's one of my five-finger friends, as I like to call him. I've known Glenn since our martial arts days back when we were teenagers, which seems like many, many moons ago. But he is truly a trusted voice on security-related members with regard to, or I should say, issues. Colonel, and he's been on the show before. I just want to welcome you back, my friend, to Kentucky's Voice.
Thanks, Bob. It's good to be back. It's been a while. I just wanted to make a quick comment on your last segment I watched there. I was, and most of my time was as an active duty guy with the Guard, but I later deployed with 10 Special Forces at the beginning of the war when we infiltrated into Iraq, and then went on to work for Joint IED Defeat, and went to Iraq a couple more times, and also worked all over, so including Europe. But so I made my way out to my hammock in my backyard, and a plane flies over, and it's about 5,000 to 6,000 feet, my guess. And at that point, like I said, I'm a former aviator, rotor wing, fixed wing, and this thing is spraying a chemtrail. And I had seen a talk show where Prince was talking about that after he passed away. I was watching it, and I was like, oh, that's just a contrail. It's not a chemtrail. Well, like your previous guest said, that happens way up, 30, 35,000 feet, not at 5,000 to 7,000 feet.
Ah, okay.
So I was shocked. But at that point, I started looking for him, and occasionally I would see him. So I don't think there's anything, and that was in West Virginia, right on the border with Ohio. So I'm sure it's happening in Kentucky too.
Yeah, and it's interesting, Glenn, because and more information is coming out on that now as well. And it's like, and John has a vast background. My former guest, State Representative John Hodgson, and you're right. I mean, chemtrails are something that you will see at high altitude, 30,000 feet, but completely different, like you're bringing up, when you're looking at something that's, and you would know, I mean, because of your background, again, you were a fixed wing and rotor blade qualified. In fact, I think you commanded a group up in Pennsylvania, as my memory serves me, up there dealing with attack helicopters. So you kind of know a thing or two about when you see a plane flying or a helicopter, you have a pretty good idea at what altitude they're at. So you make a very good point, and it is something that, thank God, this administration's starting to take a deeper look at. And then, we've seen some of the natural catastrophes that have happened. The most recent one, obviously, down in Texas. Then we think back, what happened back in North Carolina and Georgia and Florida. When you start seeing what they call once in a lifetime events, it does make you start scratching your head. So I'm just pleased to see that the administration is taking this seriously and actually diving into it head first. So thank you for that insight on that. And I do want to get into another topic that's very near and dear to my heart, and that's the protection of our country. And I do have a clip from the Sean Ryan show where a former CIA targeter, Sarah Adams, talks about the very real possibility of terrorist attacks on American soil in the near future. Please play clip 5.
Not had a man walk up to a building with a suicide vest on the United States. Americans don't understand this. Al-Qaeda knows this, right? So this is new and innovative, especially now. You don't have to walk upside of the building. You can walk in the building because of the advancement of the vest. The other thing is, in the United States, we haven't had Fideian attackers. So the concept is the terrorist fights to the death. So he's not exactly a suicide bomber, but he will fight till either all of us are dead or all of his people are dead. We think it's going to be a swarming attack, right? Multiple different attacks at one time across multiple cities. We think there will be suicide bombers just because some of the attackers went through suicide bomber training and they have these vests. And then we think there's these Fideian attackers who will carry on until they're killed.
You just rephrase that. So these guys are trained and they are going to fight until they're killed.
Yes, and that matters, right? So I was watching this video and it was a suicide bombing in Kabul years ago. The bomber blew up and then everyone starts moving in. The first responders move in, right? And then another guy walks in and blows up. We know this is a tactic, but if Americans don't understand this as a tactic and don't understand these attackers are going to fight to the death, think about that. Battle's going on, the attacker surrenders, he might have the suicide vest, we let our guard down. That man came to die, right? He's going to fight till he dies or you dies. So we can't let our guards down, and they know our weakness. So we have to be very careful that we don't have more people die in these second and third order effects of not knowing their intent.
And again, that was Sarah Adams. She's a former CIA targeter and analyst, very well respected. Not someone that's just spouting opinions for the sake of spouting them, but she knows her stuff, and to a point that she's been on the Sean Ryan show. She's been on with Scott Mann as well, another friend to our program. Who Scott's been on our program several times as well, and nationally known also as an author. So these are chilling. Colonel Kelly, I'm concerned.
Yeah. Well, and I think we should be concerned. I heard Scott Mann say on Sean Ryan, he thought there were over 300,000 terrorists in the country. I have no reason to doubt that. There were 2.2 million gotaways, of course, of 4 years of open borders. And now, just like the recent tunnel that they found that went from Tijuana to San Diego, I'm sure the terrorists are willing to pay the cartels more to get in scot-free, like through a tunnel, plus the 2.2 million gotaways that they saw on sensors. How many do we really have here that nobody has interacted with at all? It could be, 3 to 5 million easily. And the fact that, and I'm sure Scott Mann has talked about this, as have others, but they completely shut down India with the Mumbai attacks. They attacked 8 different places over 3 days. It was only 10 guys.
Oh, wow.
They killed 172, but they completely shut down Mumbai. And, they'd hit one place, go to another place. Some of them got trapped in. I can't go into much detail because it's not that long of a show. But, these attacks have been prevalent throughout the world. In Nairobi, Kenya, I think I've sent some pictures of Chris Craighead, the SAS, British SAS guy who happened to be there, which that's an interesting story. And I know that you watched the podcast on Sean Ryan with him too. But that was a 22-hour siege. Mumbai was 3 days. But there were only 5 people involved in the incident in Nairobi. They killed 20-some. All 5 of them were killed. Of course, the first guy died because he blew himself up with a suicide vests, like Sarah was talking about. So it's a type of warfare that we're not used to. But these guys have been well trained. With the bases we left in Afghanistan, they've been using them to train. If you've seen any video of them, I mean, they look like a great 3-gun shooter or a SF operator out there with pistols and carbine, at least the few that I've seen. And you add, and used to, they were not good shots. Okay. They would use that full automatic switch on an AK and spray and pray that they hit, right? Well, now, they've been training on our old bases with our equipment, with our training ranges, and the 10,000-man Islamic Army that actually took Syria was basically under the training of one of Osama bin Laden's sons, and they went in and took the Syrian army. So it's not out of the realm of possibility that we've got tens of thousands here that are trained to be operators and go out there and hit multiple places, as she was talking about swarm attacks and complex attacks where you have IEDs and automatic rifle fire or even just small arms fire. But, I don't know of any city in the country, if you hit 10 places, 8 or 10 places in one day, that they've got enough assets to react.
Yeah, and that was going to be my next question. We have a little over a minute to go in this segment. Of course, we'll come back and talk more about it. But from your perspective, and I think you're answering that question, how real is the threat, and are we prepared as a nation? And there's a minute to go in this segment.
Well, I think the threat is absolutely real, and that's why what I tell my kids: don't go to places where there is a large gathering. Try to avoid concerts. I wish they would listen to me, but good, sweet targets of opportunity like that, where people are going to be all in there, unarmed, because it's a concert or something like that, is a great target.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. I tell my friends, family, children the exact same things, to avoid big crowds where at all possible. You're listening to Kentucky's Voice. My special guest right now is Colonel Glenn Kelly, retired. Stay tuned. We'll be back to talk about the Chinese threat and data security and other concerns.
Kentucky's Voice Radio, online at kyvoice.org.
And welcome back to the final segment of Kentucky's Voice. My guests today have been Representative John Hodgson in the first half of the program, and now I'm joined by my good friend, retired Army Colonel Glenn Kelly, and former Green Beret. And we have been talking about national security, the threat of attacks. These threats are real. You know, I learned some things in that last segment. I had not heard about the San Diego tunnel that they had basically dug from Mexico up to San Diego. That when you told me that before the show started, my jaw kind of dropped. I thought, golly, you know, and we only know how many. They estimate thousands of enemy combatants are in our nation. We know under the Biden administration that they allowed hundreds, if not thousands, of not even middle-aged, young Chinese men were allowed to come across the border. I mean, I look back on that and just think how absurdly stupid that was. And I got to believe it's more than stupid. I think it was intentional, you know, that they were allowing these enemy combatants to come into our nation. And Glenn, you were just talking now about how things are progressing and that there's real, I guess, sleeper cells that are able to activate on a moment. You were talking about in the last segment how quickly a small group, from 5 to 10, what kind of havoc they can create, and really how unprepared we are. And I know you had a little bit more that you wanted to share with regard to that.
Yes. First, I'll touch on that tunnel. That was the 95th tunnel they found in like 8 years in Southern California. Wow. So how many have they not found? I know way back when I was the counter drug coordinator, one of the first in the nation, we found our first tunnel on the Texas-Mexico border, and it left a warehouse in Mexico, and it came out in a trucking company in Texas. And that had an electric mining car, lights, ventilation, and the guys who built it, their skeletons were still in the tunnel. So wow, they've been around for a while. That was back under the first Bush. That's how far back that goes. But, with no pressure at all, like they've had the last 4 years, who knows what we're dealing with. But the other part that I really wanted to touch on, we've already had attacks around the country already. The latest was in Boulder, Colorado, with the guy with the flamethrower and Molotov cocktails, who was Islamic or jihadist terrorist. And, you look back to Orlando, Florida, the Pulse nightclub, and then San Bernardino. So there have been people who have, I don't want to say self-radicalized, but they were here in the country and radicalized. Most of them weren't trained and then sent in. They basically got their training once they were here, or they grew up here, who were jihadist terrorists. So it's nothing new. However, just like Sarah Adams was talking about, swarming attacks, complex attacks, she said on another podcast that I caught that they were planning on hitting 15 U.S. cities at once, kind of as a revenge attack for Osama bin Laden being killed. And there were also, it was supposed to be timed with attacks on cities in Europe. So I believe that the priorities of our federal agencies today are better than they were. I hope that they are doing everything they can. I feel sure that they are, to find whoever these people are in the country. And like I say, it's going to be tough because a lot of these people probably went through tunnels and weren't even seen, plus a 2.2 million that they saw on sensors, but they were never met face to face with a Border Patrol agent. So there is a large possibility, we could have 1 million terrorists inside the country or
That's
more.
insane. I can't even imagine. That's to me is crazy, because you might as well say that's an incredible army that's here now.
And it very well could be. And I'll go back to Scott Mann's. I think he said 300,000 on Sean Ryan's. He probably knows better than I do, but still even if it's 5,000, when you're hitting shutting down a whole city with 10 guys for 3 days.
Yeah. No, I see your point on that, Glenn, because that's absolutely mind-numbing and boggling to think about. How we could even look at handling that, and fortunately, we are a little bit different than the rest of the world in that we have, within our police departments, we have SWAT operations or operators, not just local, but in the state level. But we have the FBI. We have, and I'm sure in a situation like that, you would obviously see the military getting involved very quickly, as well.
Well, I would hope so. Probably ought to stay away from commenting on that. Posse comitatus, I'm sure, will be suspended, and
yes.
Those type of things. However, still, if it were 15 cities and 8 or 10 places in each city were attacked, it could be overwhelming for the capabilities of that city and state very quickly. And that's what's, I think the lessons learned is, we have to be more vigilant. If you're a citizen out there and you see something, call the police, call the FBI, let them know something looks wrong. Try to avoid places where there are large gatherings, which would be sweet targets, particularly where U.S. citizens are disarmed, like ball games and concerts and things like that. The other thing, you look at Christian Craighead, one SAS operator went in and disrupted that attack in Nairobi.
Yes, he did.
He killed half of them himself, and he did a lot. Well, there's a lot of citizens armed in the United States. And that's why I think those places I mentioned, another place that they've hit in Europe in the past, are the non-secure areas of airports. Of course, one of the big targets in Mumbai was the big train station. And, it's huge. It's like Grand Central Station in New York City. So those type of places where there might be a little security, and that's like in most airports, the majority of your security is in the secure area, which is where TSA does the screening and all those type things. But some smaller airports, there's no security out there until you get to that checkpoint. Bigger airports, you're going to have a few airport police out there doing traffic control and things like that. But there's a place that people aren't going to be armed because they're going into the airport and they're going to take a flight. So, it's thinking about, okay, where would I normally be disarmed by law? To me, makes it a more lucrative target and an easier target. And I'm sure they're thinking through these things too, because, you walk into a gun store, unless you get the drop on them, you're at least going to have a shootout. Or the police station. But in Mumbai, they hit a police station too. So anyway.
Well, you're listening, folks, to Kentucky's Voice. My special guest today is Colonel Glenn Kelly. You can text us at 502-571-0970, or if you believe in the mission of Kentucky's Voice and want to financially support us, you can do so by texting us at 53555. KY Voice. We're talking about a very difficult subject today, folks, that does need to be mentioned. I did get a text in. Someone was asking, I think, in reference to our earlier segment with Representative John Hodson, And the text is local news announced that Fancy Farm would not happen because of Trump's cuts to PBS. Are they referring to the broadcast? Yes, they are referring to the broadcast. It's moving forward. PBS will not be involved with it this year, but there's plenty of other stations and entities that are picking up the slack, and including Kentucky's Voice. We plan on having somebody down there to do a degree of coverage of that important event as well. Glenn, we have a little over 2 minutes to go. The show always goes way too fast. And I know you shared a mouthful with regard to, and in fact, I had a clip from Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth. I'm not playing it because of the shortness left in the program, but he just recently was talking about the dangers of Chinese-based cloud platforms that have been, believe it or not, used by our military. And I was wondering if you had any thoughts about that.
Well, China is, in my opinion, our country's biggest threat.
Agreed.
I think, you know, they've been working with the Iranians. They've been working with others. I don't think they're out to do us any good. I think all they're trying to do is become, as it says in a book called The 100-Year Marathon, which I highly recommend, by Chris Poole. They want to be the hegemon. They want to be the world leader. They want to take us out of a power position totally. And there's another thing called unrestricted warfare you can find on Amazon. The two of which are white paper written by two of their colonels in their war college back in the 90s. And unrestricted warfare basically is war by all other means other than kinetic or shooting. So you're talking about trade. You're talking about stealing patents. You're talking about undermining currency. You're talking about even flooding somebody else's country with poison like fentanyl. So, you know, it's a threat. I'm glad we've got an administration that actually recognizes it and is trying to combat it as opposed to the last administration.
Amen to that. And folks, you've been listening to Kentucky's Voice. My special guests today have been Representative John Hodson and Colonel Glenn Kelly. Glenn, again, thank you for being on the program. These are challenging times, but we are not powerless. Stay informed, stay engaged, and most importantly, stay grounded in your faith, family, and freedom.